I'll see if I can take a bit of a break at some point in our 3-hour time. Okay. Good, it's working. I was going to worry about stuff. I was worried that it's not going to work, and of course, it's working just fine. Okay. Welcome back. We are COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester at Georgian, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together in an in-person class. And we just finished talking about assignment 2, which is due 2 short weeks from now on week 10 in November 20th. Wow, sounds like far away. So the second half of the semester is going to be pretty much all about React. And notice how things are aligned so that by the time we get to week 12-ish, you'll have an assignment that's for Node and TypeScript. We'll be talking about a little Node assignment that we're going to be putting together for the last part of it. Okay. Let's get into this stuff now and jump to this part. Our week's agenda. What is React? A brief history. I'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll get right into a demo. I need to talk a little bit about what React is because I know some of you don't still know what it is. We kind of briefly went through it as we talked about APIs and front-end frameworks, and I mentioned a bunch of them. I mentioned Angular, I mentioned React, there's Vue, and there's a bunch of other ones that are out there that are very popular. But what is React? It's a free open source front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces. It is maintained by Meta, formerly Facebook, and a community of individual developers and companies. So when was React made? So back in 2011, when Meta was Facebook, React was kind of put together by Jordan Walk, right? And later Instagram also used React, right? So a couple of your favorite, social media networks still use React, and a bunch of other ones. That was in 2012. Instagram was in 2012. In 2013, it was made open source, and it kind of started to compete with jQuery and Angular. jQuery was still a thing back in 2013, and Angular was on the rise with TypeScript technologies. So kind of at the same time, I want you to think about this time frame. We've been talking about a little bit of the history of how things have evolved. And Angular was the #1 framework at the time. And React, of course, touted itself as a library. Oh, we're not a framework, we're a library. And as you're going to see today, it's like a framework now. All right. It used to be just a library, but it's not quite a library. So at the time, React was described as the V in MVC. So React components acted as the view layer, right? And remember MVC, model, view, controller. It was a design paradigm. That's all it was, just the way we design things. And the V in MVC was React. And they said, hey, well, you can replace any front end with React, no problem, and it'll consume your API on the back end. Yes, it was that easy. It was not easy, all right? And people tried to figure out React. React has evolved since then. I'll talk about that. January 2015, Netflix announced that they were going to use React. And later, React Native, a library for building mobile applications, was released. And actually, React Native today with Flutter are the 2 most popular front-end or JavaScript hybrid frameworks to build mobile applications. So you can actually use JavaScript and web technologies to build mobile apps on Android and iOS, okay, with React Native. And so that's why it's great for you guys to learn React, because once you learn React, then you can start thinking about, well, I can use what I know with React and JavaScript technologies to build mobile apps, which is cool. We're going to fast forward to 2015 and 2016. A bunch of things came out then to improve React, React Router, Redux, a bunch of other stuff came out, that were able to handle things like routing and state management. And So it was made, to be a library, and it had a lot of features, but they wanted to add more so that they could handle more cases. And then another huge event happened in 2017 when they came out with something called React Fiber. We're not going to cover that this semester. Again, React is huge. Like we could spend, a couple of semesters going through the details of how to use React. We're only going to scratch the surface to some degree, at least in the first part, and then get into the stuff that we need. So almost like just-in-time React, as opposed to going through all the details. And they fixed Fiber, kind of fixed React's rendering algorithm. I remember what rendering means is drawing or creating the user interface, because that's what React does. And we'll talk about it in more detail. In 2019, they released something called hooks, which is a way of adding stateful logic across components. And they also saw something called suspense that came out, another component that did asynchronous rendering. Yes. So remember that HTML is stateless. And that what that means is if I'm on a page, it doesn't really care. I can sit on that page forever, right? So it doesn't maintain state. It doesn't know that I'm logged in, logged out, nothing, right? State itself, moving from one page to the other, being logged in or whatever, is handled on the server side typically, right? So what you can do with React is you can have stateful, kind of tracking, if you will, and it allows you to maintain state and almost maintain a session, all that kind of stuff on the front end, which before was only available on the back end. Okay. So suspense was a way to optimize asynchronous rendering. So that means like, I want you to think about what that means. Remember the asynchronous nature of JavaScript? I kept on saying that at the beginning and made a joke of it. Well, that was a problem with React too, is that sometimes what we'd have is you'd have to refresh. And, suspense came out. It was just another component, a subsystem. Don't think about like, what is suspense? It's just a subsystem of React. And this year, React 18 came out, and it has something called a new concurrent renderer, automated batching, and support for server-side rendering with suspense, which is kind of cool. So actually, you can actually use React on the server side as well. So really great stuff that happened with React, and it's only happened since 2011. It's not been a long time. So you got to figure over the last 11 years, React has become the #1 front-end solution for developers, right? Which if you had talked to me back in 2015, I would have said, no way, Angular is the way to go, right? I still love Angular. React is nothing, right? And then, well, then it wasn't nothing anymore. And that's how it works with JavaScript and in web technologies. Today, guys, we're talking about React, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about something else. I mean, tomorrow in the future, we're going to look back at React. And remember when we had React? And that's gone now. It's going to be something else. Or React is going to morph into something new. Yep, Svelte is up there for sure, Kyle. And Svelte, I talked about Svelte before, I would say maybe a couple of years ago. And I was saying things like, I don't know if I would support Svelte yet because there's not a lot of great support for it, like in terms of like documentation and that kind of stuff. And now Svelte is definitely something that is up and coming because how lightweight it is. Again, back to how React used to be, right? And it touts other things. Svelte says it's, well, there's no what they like to call a shadow DOM that React uses. We'll talk about that. So one thing that we have to talk about also when it comes to React is something called functional programming. And this is a cause for concern for some students because students are used to object-oriented programming, which I've kind of talked a little bit in, not too much in detail because you guys didn't have a lot of object-oriented training, if any, right, before you came into this course. We talked about classes and using a class or classes in C# or in Java or in C++ or any other programming language is very common right now, right? But functional programming has been on the rise, right, as well. It's something that is kind of competing now in many ways with classical, kind of programming. And, React kind of uses this functional concept. And so we have to talk about it a little bit. Again, it's a an advanced topic, right? And I mean it in like, even at university level, if I was going to talk to people at university level and say, it's functional programming, and people would be afraid when I talk functional programming. They're like, no, not functional programming. It's the AI, it's the singularity, it's going to take us over. No, it's not. It's not that difficult. But basically what it is this. It's like functions are the main thing, right, in your programming. Really, that's what it is, right? Functions. And here in JavaScript, we want to talk about functions as something called first-class citizens. Okay, whenever we hear first-class citizens in a programming language, I want you to think about them as equivalent to variables. That's what functions are. In many ways, that's what functions, they act like variables in JavaScript, because we can remember we had those, recall, we had like 3 different ways of declaring functions. We can make a name function, right? We can do a function with a let. We don't use var, var is illegal. We also can use some kind of arrow function. Remember there's 3 function types? Well, arrow functions and using a function with the let keyword is a way of saying it's like a variable, isn't it? You assign the reference to the anonymous function in the variable. And so because of that, they're considered first-class citizens. So here's an example of that, where we can use the let or const keywords, or var, but we don't use that. So we can declare strings and numbers with those, but we can also make a function look like this as an example, which is kind of similar to declaring a variable. So log is actually the function name, but we're making it equal to, or we're assigning through the assignment operator, which is this thing right here. We're assigning this anonymous function, and this anonymous function is going to return a reference that's going to be stored inside of the log variable. And so in this way, functions are like variables, right? And once you start thinking about like functions acting like variables, then they're like, well, I can pass a function to another function. I can return a function from another function because I can return a variable. And you can do that with functions too, right? It's just returning the reference to that function, okay? And that's where people get a little bit caught up in it. Their brain starts to twist and they're like, wait, what? I can return a function from another function? The answer is yes. You can return a reference because it's just a reference. It's just like returning a variable, right? So that's why they're considered first-class citizens, and that's why functional programming is possible with JavaScript. We also, when we talk about React, we also must talk about imperative versus declarative programming, okay? And I want to talk about what those 2 things are, because you're going to hear these words with respect to React. What is React, right? So functional programming is a part of something way larger called declarative programming, okay? And everyone is moving towards this new paradigm when it comes to mobile application development, especially in front-end frameworks. So what am I talking about? That means iOS and programming is using something called Swift, right? Swift is the language that we program our iPhones with now. And Android phones are programmed with something called Kotlin, which is an offshoot of Java, right? Both languages, Swift and Kotlin, use something called declarative programming when it comes to creating their user interfaces. And so too does React. Okay, so what is declarative? It's a style of programming where applications are structured in a way that prioritizes describing what should happen over defining how, which means we want to bury the details. I don't want you to know the details about how to do it. I just want you to tell the back-end system what you want. I want this. Cool. Once you give instructions on what you want, then the back-end system does its little magic. It does a little dance. The back-end, you don't know what's happening. It's a black box, and all of a sudden, poof, there it is. That's declarative programming. We don't need to know the details as much as know how to use the system. Okay. And when it comes to imperative programming, that's something else where we're working on code. We want to make sure that it's coded right and so on. Let's look at that example, the difference between imperative versus declarative. Okay, just a little bit. So here's imperative, right? So imagine we have a common task, making a string URL friendly. Strings can't have any spaces if you're going to make a URL out of them, right? You can't have spaces in the URL. So how to do that? Well, we want to replace spaces with hyphens. Yay, right? That's kind of an example, right? And first, how do we do it with imperative? Well, we would go through a for loop, right? And go through each of the string characters. And when we see a space, we replace it with a hyphen. That's details. I'm giving you the details of how to do the replacement, okay? And when you look at the code, you're like, okay, but really the code is not descriptive in any way, right? It's not like you have to look and see what it is. Unless you know what this is, unless you've coded before, right? You're going to look through this and go, okay, right? And maybe you can follow it. And if you're a non-programmer, or if you're someone who's more of an artist or a designer, this is going to bug you, right? Because you're going to have to figure out how this all works, okay? And I want you to think about what this is. So people there's two camps on this thing, right? So the programmer camp. Okay, I'm going to talk now as a programmer. Oh, those designers, they suck, right? They shouldn't be allowed to touch our code, right? Programmer. The designer, I'm going to step over on the designer side. The designer's going to say, oh, those programmers, they don't know what we want, right? We want our designs just to flow, right? And, you know, everyone has a different way of doing things. And, you know, I think with imperative programming, right, it's very structured and it's, you know, oriented like this. But here's the declarative version. If you look at the declarative version, right, it looks like this, right? Which is like, hey, here's my string, and I want you to do a string replace. I want you to replace all spaces with hyphens, right? And it's the same result. So string.replace does all the work, the heavy lifting that we did with the for loop here, right? We did this big for loop and we went through each character and all this kind of stuff, but string replace did it all for us, right? And you might like say something like, yeah, but you don't know what's going on under the hood, right? Because people, you know, if you're a hardcore programmer is like, well, maybe I can write it better. Maybe I can make it more efficient. Maybe I can, you know, whatever. And then the artist might say, or the designer might say something, but who cares? As long as it's done, who cares how it's done, right? As long as it works well, it's probably going to be better than I can code it, right? That's what they're going to say. And by the way, they're right. And it's probably going to be better than the programmer can code it too, because these things that are coded here in the language have been tested to death. All right, they're not something that is like released randomly with bugs. Okay, it's not like that. They've been tested, so chances are they're efficient and probably more efficient than the average programmer can write. Okay, so it's not a negative thing, right? So string replace, along with something called a regular expression, and I don't know if you guys have done any regular expressions, probably not, am I thinking, right, in your classes? You may have used them?
Yeah.
There you go, email validation. Well, it's almost like a string expression that basically says, do this, find this, search for this. And once you search for this, replace it with this. That's what kind of regular expressions allow us to do. Or search for this if it exists. If it doesn't exist, give me an error. There's your validation, right? So really what it is string replace is a way of describing what is supposed to happen. Spaces in the string should be replaced, right? The details of how the spaces are replaced are abstracted away because we don't care about the details. We just want the thing to be done, right? And this is, again, where programmers would argue with you and say, no, God, no, this is terrible, right? But guys, here's what's coming, okay? There's a coming storm of changes in the programming world. And I'm not afraid of that, okay? In the future, I want you to look in the future with me for a second. Shut your eyes and look at this future of how programming is going to be. Guys, we're going to have less code. Less code. I'm going to talk to my computer and say something like, Alexa, make this happen, you know, and Alexa's just going to code for me, right? I'm serious. It's coming. And you're going to be like, no, we can't give up our programming powers to an assistant. Wrong. It's going to happen. Right? No, that's what people think. They're going to be out of a job, but actually we're going to have just other opportunities, right? So, and what this also does for us, here's something that I want you to think about. It's called the low code, no code revolution. It's an actual thing. If you look it up online, low code, no code, it's going to happen with game development. It's going to happen with application development, mobile, web, everywhere. And AI, machine learning, is going to help us code. Right now, it can help us draw, right? In some cases. You can tell your machine to draw something, and there's some projects out there that allow you to draw a beautiful picture just from a few keywords, right? So it's coming, and it's going to be better and better. And it's scary because, it's going to allow us to be more declarative and less imperative, more declarative. I want to declare to the computer what I want, and then the computer is going to just do it, right? And I won't know any of the details. I won't know what's happening underneath. I won't know. And you know what? Most of us will not care. Google, take me to my, navigate to home. Do I know how Google is doing that pathfinding? No. We just know it's using some kind of satellite, and we know that it's trying to find the shortest path. We don't know how it's doing it at all. We have no idea about the underlying algorithm. We go on a Google website right now, and we type in a search, and it's just going to do it for us. We have no idea what's going on underneath, for the most part, how the search is being handled. Most people don't know, and most people don't care, to be honest with you. Here are some concerns about this stuff. Security and privacy is one of the biggest concerns with no code, low code. They don't know if you're being tracked, or if the code is safe, or full of viruses, or, right? But we can't think like that. What we have to think about is it's coming. And the beautiful thing about declarative programming, especially no code and low code, is it's going to give non-programmers and artists an opportunity to contribute. It's going to give children a chance to code from the very beginning. When they're very young in class, they can say, computer, I want you to make this, and it's just going to do it for them. And they're going to be able to use computers and like a tool, as opposed to how we're using it right now. Okay, and it's going to revolutionize the way we think. And the future, we're not even going to be able to predict all the new apps that are going to come out, because they're going to be so interesting. Okay, now there's another camp to this, and I got to talk about. Now I'm being very idealistic when I talk about this stuff, right? I'm saying, oh, it's optimism. Everything's going to work well. Legislation, okay? There's politics always involved with this kind of stuff. And I know I'm digressing, but it's all related to what we're talking about here, just to give you a sense of how this is moving, right? Legislation might not go with declarative programming. They might say, no, we can't allow that to happen because people will lose their jobs, like we said before, right? No, we have to slow things down. No, can't allow this no code, low code stuff. My union doesn't support it, blah, 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 right? Might be the thing that comes up with it. How are you going to replace human jobs with machine, code? It's not cool. I don't like it. And the other thing is that, there's other camps out there that say, I don't care. I'm a programmer. I'm talking like a programmer now. I don't care. Let those non-programmers use whatever no code, low code solution they want. There'll just be more of us because we have to fix all their problems, right? We got to fix all the mistakes because they're going to kind of smash code together somehow, and it's going to be ugly, and we're going to go there and fix it up. And that might be true, at least in the beginning. Okay. All right. So imperative versus declarative. Imperative is this is what I want. Declarative is this is how I want exactly how to do it. Right. So the document object model, or DOM, right? If you think what the document object model is, it's the HTML tag or element and everything inside of it. We have the head of the document. We have the body of the document. And inside the body of the document, the body element, we can put in whatever we want. And normally what we would do is we would say document.create element. We can make an element like this, and we would create our DOM, our own document object model for our page. And if we were to do it in an imperative way, if I was to actually go and create my entire page this way, imperatively, what about if I had 10,000 lines of code? What if I had, if I wanted to make my page maintainable, right, or whatever? Think about that original way we made our pages, where I had the same navigation over and over and over again, stamped on every single page, on our home page, our content page, our bio page, our services page. Every single page had like a lot of content that was repeated, and doing it imperatively, but actually injecting content this way, it's not really functional. It's not really, maintainable in any way. However, if you use something like React, it'll look like this. And I want you to look at the const welcome is equal to, and then in brackets, this is like, think about what this is. This is a function, right? Here's the function. The function we're using is an arrow function. Remember, arrow functions also pass through, just as a review, the the syntactical this, if you will. And what happens is it kind of goes through and from the main function. And but take a look at this. We have in brackets, we have something that looks like HTML. This stuff that looks like HTML in React language is called JSX. Okay, that's what it is. It's almost like a mini language, if you will, that looks very similar to HTML, but is not HTML. In fact, what we're actually doing is we're injecting HTML-like code in our pages. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. I want to make a function, right? I declare a function, and then I render that function. Okay, here I'm actually making a component. This is what a component might look like. We're going to talk about components today at a very high level. My component is called welcome. It's the welcome component. In HTML, we have components like a div tag, right? And we have a main component, and we have an aside, and we have a header and a footer, and we have H1s and anchor tags and buttons and a bunch of others. Those are all components that are built into HTML, right? We can make our own components here with React, something that's called welcome, and welcome is actually an element. Here's the welcome element. Look, it has an opening brace and a closing angle bracket, right? It's like we're making our own components in React. And the beautiful thing about this is we can make our own reusable components that have a lot of other stuff inside of them, including code, which is pretty cool, right? So this is the declarative way, right? We create a component and it's something that's reusable and we inject it into our code. Okay, that's how it works. So the stuff that you've been doing with strings and JavaScript for the first assignment is kind of the same way, but a very much more primitive way of doing it than this. This is the way we're going to do it from now on. I got you to do things imperatively in the first half of semester. And in the second half, it's going to be more declarative. Okay, hopefully you're sick of me using imperative and declarative by now. Okay. All right. We also have to talk about a little bit about functional concepts. There's a couple of slides here. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's just your intro, but I need you to hear these words so that you've heard them. And so you hear me too. Immutability. You're going to hear the term immutable, right? Data in React is immutable, which means we don't monkey with it. We just transform it. We never change the data that's incoming. So if I access a database, I'm not changing the data. Right? I might add to the database, but I'm never changing a piece of data that's coming from the database. I'm just transforming it. That's what I'm doing. The database itself stays clean. I'm just taking the data. So data is immutable when it comes to functional programming. Functional pure programming also use something called pure functions. And pure functions are functions, special functions, that return a value that's computed based on their arguments, right? So here are the requirements for pure functions. They must take at least one argument and always return a value for another function. They must do that. So it cannot be an empty function that doesn't take any arguments. That's not a pure function. Okay, I'm just talking about just naming conventions here so we understand ourselves, right? We must have some kind of argument. Next, it does not cause any side effects. So it doesn't set global variables or change anything about the application state. So it remains, whatever the application state was before is unchanged because of our pure functions, okay? And the last thing is we treat their arguments as immutable data. So going back to the whole immutability thing, which is we don't modify the data that's coming in into the function itself. The data is immutable. We're just going to be able to use it, but we're not going to change anything, okay? So again, these are just concepts for functional programming. We can't use all of them, by the way, and I'll talk about why. Remember, we're only scratching the surface this semester more on React. We can't go into such a deep level for a lot of reasons. But, again, we need to talk about these concepts because we're going to see them. Data transformation. We just talked about transforming data, transforming immutable data. And the way to do that is with two core functions that belong to JavaScript. One of them is called map, and the other one is called reduce. Okay, map and reduce. And we really haven't learned about map and reduce too much, but we are going to learn about map and reduce this semester, right? Because we need to do that. Also filter, map, reduce, and filter. Those are three little functions that we're going to need to do, and it allows us to do a couple things: loop through the data in the array automatically with no for each loop or for loop. Remember, declarative. The looping and the going through the data is happening underneath for us. That's what's happening. And we just have to accept that it's just going to work. Okay. Again, it's a little bit less control from a programming perspective. You're like, no, I can't do this. No, you know, the Death Star is burning. I am the Empire. I am the evil Empire, and I have to have control. No, you're not. Okay. In React, it's not the evil Empire. You are a developer, and you don't care about the details when we're doing this kind of stuff. We're going to use array map and array reduce, and it just works great. Absolutely, Kyle. It is very, very important. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because you guys should know how to use map and reduce and filter and all those things and what they do. It does looping internally. We'll talk about how in a second. Other thing to know is that functional programming uses something called higher order functions. Okay, what are higher order functions? Functions that can manipulate other functions. If I can manipulate other functions, it's a higher order function. All right, that's what it is. I know this is really weird. I just tried to break it down for you so that you're, it's easier for you to understand and for me to explain. Okay, to be honest with you, there's a lot of things we can talk about with these things. Look, I've broken down these 6 concepts that each concept can take, you know, I don't know, the whole day to talk about. We're breaking it down into like a little paragraph. So I don't want to go into too much detail here. The other one is that higher order functions can take functions in as arguments and return functions, or both. Okay, either one or both. I can take functions as arguments or return functions, or I can take arguments as functions and return functions. Okay. Array.map, array filter, array reduce are all functions, all take functions as arguments. So they're all higher order functions in many ways that are built into JavaScript. All those 3 functions, right? Map, filter, and reduce. We're going to learn about them. Please bear with me. Yeah, I can't talk about everything in one day. Okay, I don't want to. It's already confusing enough as it is, and then putting more in there is going to be even more crazy. Right? So, recursion, a dirty word in programming, right? And I'll talk about why it's dirty. Because when people see recursion, they're like, "No, recursion, you're going to get Stack Overflow." Right? Because really what recursion is a function calling itself. That's why it's dirty. A function keeps calling itself. But yeah, and the reason why it's like that is because there has to be a way to stop calling itself, often called the base case. So again, I'm going to keep calling myself over and over again until I reach some kind of result. Actually, map, reduce, and filter are recursive in many ways. And we got to talk about how this works. So again, it all kind of blends together. It works really well with asynchronous processes because the function should keep calling themselves until, here's the base case, the data is available. Remember, we were using Ajax fairly briefly this semester, and we said Ajax, it's asynchronous, the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. We don't know when it's going to return data. That is, you know, event-driven programming in many ways is kind of recursive, and because it's continually has its own little loop that's running in the background, right? Think about the event queue as a recursive loop, almost like a loop that keeps going forever and ever. Now, again, if you're a programmer, you're going to say, wait, Tom, you can replace recursion with while loops. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can always replace a recursive process with a while loop, but recursion, the idea or the concept of recursion is something we use in functional programming. And the last one is composition, right? So we want to have a bunch of these smaller functions, right? And we want to knit all these functions together into a, you know, combine them somehow, whether it's in series or parallel, or compose them into larger functions until eventually we have something called an application, right? So composition. We compose our application in a series of smaller components that are functionally driven, functional components. Okay. All right. So it's a lot of stuff I just talked about, and you'd be like, thank you, Tom, for that nice overview. I still don't understand anything because you haven't shown us anything yet. Yes, I know, but I'm going to talk about these. I'm going to cut back to these terms when I'm doing the stuff in React today. And I don't want you to sit there and go, what is that again? Right? I talked about it. So then hopefully it's going to trigger your brain and you're going to go, oh yeah, that is what Tom was talking about. Hopefully you're going to get there. Couple more slides, and we'll actually do the demo. Okay. Yeah. It's nonstop until it gets to the base case. So imagine if you're doing a while loop, right? In a while loop or a for loop, we have control mechanisms, right? In a for loop, we have for I is equal to 0 until I is equal to, whatever. And a while loop, we have a sentinel variable, and the sentinel variable is going to be like an index or a count. While count is less than 10, loop, right? Or while count, while we may have a Boolean, like while is running is true, keep going, right? And then somewhere in the while loop, you have is running is equal to false. And because it breaks the condition, then the while loop stops. That condition for the while loop or for loop is the base case, equivalent to the base case in recursion. We have to come up with a way of stopping the loop somehow. Otherwise, we have something called an endless loop. And if it's an endless loop, then we run out of memory eventually, right? Because we're going to keep on looping. And the same thing goes with, or we're going to have our program hang. It's going to look like it's not moving and doing anything, right? And so recursion, the reason why it's dangerous for junior programmers is they don't know how to put together the base case. Now, here's something else I want to talk about since you're asking about recursion. Recursion is a powerful tool in machine learning, right? And in pathfinding and in game dev. We do a lot of that stuff. Actually, AI uses recursion a lot, right? Because it's an elegant way of solving an endless looping condition. So again, we'll talk about this in a bit. Okay. Let's talk about how React works. So when we work with React, it's most likely that we're going to use something called JSX. JSX is a JavaScript syntax. That's where it comes from. JavaScript syntax, right? That looks a lot like HTML. That's why it's called JSX, JavaScript syntax. Woohoo, right? What an interesting thing. And to truly understand how we're going to use React, though, we need to understand its most atomic units. There's two units we're going to be talking about today. One of them is going to be called elements, and the other one is going to be called components. And it's just an idea of how we can structure a React application. Okay. Let's talk about elements. So elements make up HTML documents, right? Like we've seen elements, like I said, the H1 element, the div element, the paragraph element, the button element, whatever, right? And what we want to do with React is we want to make our own elements, right? Like we said before. And remember, we're not going to directly interact with the DOM itself. We're not going to do a create element. We're not going to issue that kind of command. Instead of issuing a create element, what we're going to do is let React do all the heavy lifting. It's going to be a black box for us. We're going to issue a command and React is going to go poof and the magic is going to happen. That's how we're going to do it. Okay. So again, declarative. And it's going to render and reconcile all the elements we've constructed, right? Through its creational process. The way it works is this. And here's the fundamental way. We're not even going to do this. We're going to even go lighter weight than this. Okay. In the beginning, this is how React was done. It'd be like this: const dish. Let's suppose we're making a dish, and we use React. Think about this as the React library. Hey, React, I want you to create an element. What's this element called? It's an H1. It's using the H1 type element, and the element is going to have inside of it the details inside the element is going to be big salmon, right? Big salmon, right? And then we're going to use the render components, or the render part of React, to draw this component. And the way we would do it is we would say, let's patch this dish component or this dish element inside of the React DOM render method, and the dish element would be attached to the root element inside of your code. That's underlying how it works, okay? By the way, you will never have to do this in our class. I'm never gonna do that with you. We're not gonna do this low level, all right? This is even low level for us. We're even gonna go higher, more abstract than this, okay? I'm just talking about it here because this is how it works, right? And if you think about what this is, here is this idea of passing in a function to another function. The function is that we're creating is dish. Dish is actually a function. React create is using something called a factory to create a function and hold the function reference inside of this dish element here, okay? And then we're using the render function that's part of React, right? To take this function and do what it's supposed to do by creating an H1 element and with the content of baked salmon. And we're going to render it or draw it in the root element, within the root element itself. That's what it does. Again, here there's no savings. If we can do this with JavaScript too, right? We can just create an element with JavaScript and then we can inject it anywhere we want. So there's no savings in this case, okay? But at the root, this is how React will work, okay? One thing also to think about when it comes to the underlying components of React, right, is it creates something called a shadow DOM. Shadow DOM, right? So it's almost like a document object model that we have in memory, okay? And I construct everything in memory first, I compose it, and then what I do is I generate my HTML afterwards, okay? Instead of me having my page pre-generated for me, I'm just going to inject everything into the page itself, right? After I generate it. First, I have a generation code, and then I target my generation code at a specific place in the page, and it injects it for me. I don't have to worry about Ajax. I don't have to worry about any of the heavy lifting at all. In fact, guys, you don't even have to worry about transpiling with TypeScript. None of that. It does everything for you, right? As you're going to see. But I want you, the reason why I talked about TypeScript in the first half of the semester, when you look at it, you're like, wait, how come I'm getting, well, this is TypeScript, right? You know how TypeScript is kind of put together, right? That's the idea in the first half. But now you're going to see it and you're like, okay, it's TypeScript, but I have nothing for me to do. It's all done for me 100%. And it's going to emit or create pure JavaScript for me. That's going to work on every browser. Okay, and it's all happening under the hood with none of your control. It's automatic. Okay, we're going to go from standard, like we were driving in the beginning. The first half is standard driving or manual control to automatic. We're going to switch to automatic in a second. Okay, I know you're looking at me going, I don't believe you. It's true, I swear. All right, it's going to be easier. All right, let's see how this goes. So React elements. There's also something called React components. And React components are functions. They're going to be functions that we're going to see. And remember that our interface is made up of things like buttons and lists and headings and a bunch of other stuff. And in React, we're going to describe, using declarative programming, each of these parts as a component, right? And what this will allow us to do is reuse the same component structure, and we can populate our structures in our page with different sets of data, which is really, really great. And we're going to use components, in React for page content and for our main navigation. That's what we're going to be doing, at least today. We'll talk about how that's done. Okay. A note about classes. When we use Bootstrap, this is just the last note that I want you to look at, because we're going to see this anomaly when we start programming now. Okay. Bootstrap. Remember, if we use Bootstrap classes, or if you make your own CSS classes, you have to use the class keyword, right? But remember, we're composing our own elements, and class is a reserved word in JavaScript. So what React has done is change class to class name. So every time we want to use something like class from Bootstrap or your own classes in CSS, you must use class name instead. I'm putting it here so you never forget it, because this is one of the biggest problems. Junior developer would say, I want to use React, and they're like, oh my God, why is all of my code have errors? because you have to convert everything that says class to class name. It's coming. And there's other little conversions too that we're going to make. Okay, let's get to it. I want to start coding, right? And the first way we're going to start coding, any questions, by the way, before we move on? So we talked about a couple things. We talked about declarative versus imperative. We talked about functional programming. We talked about two components, two atomic components we're going to be using or in React today, which are elements and components, those two things, okay? And they mean different things, elements and components. Okay, so last time, remember, we had way back here, if I go to GitHub, and let's go to Georgian, just to show you where we were. Way back here, we had our live site, and we also had, that was in week 6 when we're talking about we talked about how to make a live site, and we had week 5. Remember this week 5 part? I want to start from there. So week 5 is where we were. And just to go back to our little code here, I'm just going to go to my desktop and I'm going to go to Georgian. And here is here. And you can see here's week 4. I want to get week 5. We were working remotely last time. And just like we've done before in the past, I'm just going to use my command prompt to get my stuff. I'm going to do a git clone, right? So, but first I need to teleport into that folder. Here's the folder, right? And I'm going to do a git clone, and it's going to be github.com, /, and I need to put the HTTPS, unfortunately. Yes. And then it's Georgian College. And then / my repository name, which is COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester, and then week 5. Okay. If I did everything properly, it's going to just inject my code. Git clone is a good way of doing it. And if you use git clone, it's good. But remember, whenever you git clone my stuff, that means it's pointing to my repository, and you need to point it to your repository if you're going to clone my stuff. This is for your in-class exercise 5, which is also live. This is part of your ICE 5. Okay, so just letting you know this. So please, when we're doing it together, this is why we're doing this part. So you can submit your ICE 5 to me this week. All right, so now that we have week 5, let's just rename it to what we want it to be, week 5. There it is. Okay, and I don't have to close this off yet. So week 5, notice it has all of this, and it's pointing to the wrong spot. I want to CD space, and I want to CD to this, and I want to remove my remote. So remember, it's like this. If I do a git remote -v, you can see that I have 2 remotes that point into week 5, right? So when I duplicate week 5, I want to make it something called week 8, right? Then I want to move away from week 5 and duplicate it. Now, the great thing about what we're doing this week is we're not going to duplicate anything, right? I'm going to use week 5. I'm going to use week 5 as my content base, and I want to try and duplicate what we had in week 5 in our new React app, okay? Now, instead of writing React by ourselves, here's the beautiful thing. We're not going to do anything by ourselves. We're going to use a generation tool that we can use online, okay? So let me try this out. Please go to Create React App. So if you go to create-react app, if you go to Create React App, there is a create react app.dev. So that is the site that I want you to go to. And I know you're probably saying something like, wait, but Tom, I want to know how to do it. Yeah, I know you do. But we're going to do what we need to do in this course. If I focus on the details, we're never going to get this course done. You can spend all day talking low level. And I want you to do it a little bit higher level, and then I'll go through it. So what is Create React App? Create React App is React, but what it does is it's a little function that allows us to scaffold out our application and all the components we need, right, without lifting a finger. Okay? And why do I want to do this? Because I want a very quick way of generating my code, a very quick way to start. And React enables this. Instead of me starting low level and doing what we did in the first half of the semester and putting all our folders together and all that stuff, React is just going to do it all for us. Okay, and then we're going to modify that, you know, and to make it our own. Okay, so we're going to use something called NPX. Notice if I zoom in here what it says, NPX create React app. Okay, NPX is not Yarn and it's not NPM. It's actually a way of using an executable package. It's almost like saying, I want you to execute this package that's online. It doesn't even exist on my system. And what it's going to do is it's going to go up to the NPM registry and run it for you without downloading anything. So why is this the way to go? Why is NPX? You can do it with Yarn, and you can also download and install it with NPM. But why do it this way? What do you think? Why would I want to generate my scaffold? I want to scaffold my stuff out without downloading anything. Anyone think of why? Well, here's a reason, if you can't think of it, because React is constantly changing and updating, right? And they do a lot of little bug fixes and overnight stuff. So if I use NPX create React app, it's going to get the latest version of my tool, my platform tool, that's going to download and install everything I need for it. Instead of me downloading a tool, if I download a tool on my system, and then if I do an installation on this old tool, guess what? It might be out of date. I might be using an older version of React or an older version of Babel or an older version of whatever it's going to be packaged in together, Webpack. So NPX is a great way of doing it. One thing that we also need with NPX is, so you can do it this way again. You can do npm install React at latest. You can do it that way. But I don't recommend it. In fact, when it comes to getting started, there's two things, right? We're going to do this, but instead of just doing this, we're going to also install a template, okay? So let me just go down. So again, you can do it this way again, but it doesn't recommend it, right? But we want to use a template. And a lot of times the template we want to use is TypeScript. So this is what it's going to look like right here. This is the command I want, okay? So this command says this: I want you to scaffold out a new React application with all of the folders and everything else I need, Tom. That's what I need. And it's going to also support TypeScript right from the very beginning. Isn't that awesome? So there's nothing for us to do. Now, you don't know why I'm saying it's awesome, but let's do it, right? So one thing to do is we can actually copy this thing, this little command. And I'm going to put this on the chat for you guys too, if you don't know if you're not with me. So here's the command we're going to use. And I'm just going to go here and we can't be inside of week 5. We're going to go up one level. So we're inside of COMP2112. And then I'm going to right click and issue that command, this command right here, npx create React app. Now, I don't want to call it my app. I don't want to call it my app. That's not good. Let's call it something that's reasonable, like week 8, you know, something like that. Yeah. Yes, yes, and React app. We can't use we're going to use week 5 as for content, only for content. We're not going to do anything with week 5 in terms of copy pasting anymore. We're going to make it just for content, right? And I'm going to make a brand new repository now because you're going to see we're going to have everything is going to be different after this. Okay. So I'm going to call it week 8. Okay. And don't panic. Don't panic. I'm just going to press enter here and it's going to do everything that I want it to do. Watch. As soon as I press enter, it's going to go out to the web. It's going to download and install all the components I want. It says, you need to install the following packages. Are you sure? And I'm going to say, yes, do it, right? And it's going to do everything it needs here. And if it has a problem, if it says, cannot create the name this, it says no longer supports uppercase characters. And I wanted to show you this, right? It also says a patch version of NPM is available, right? And all this kind of stuff. Huh. Oh man, remember we used MVM for, for JavaScript for our library, right? Remember we used MVM for Node.js? Remember that whole process we did? Oh man, what if our Node.js has improved? If I do an MVM list you can see that our current version of Node is 18.9.0. Huh, wait a minute. React just told us that things have improved. Let's go to nodejs.org and let's see what our latest version is. Holy crap, it's already at 19. Right? This is why we use MVM, guys. If I want you to switch from version 18.9 to 19, normally you have to uninstall everything and reinstall it. I don't want you to do this. Now this is coming to the reason why we're using MVM in the first place. So now let's do it. So I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to go something like MVM install latest. So it's going to download the latest version of Node, right? Please do this with me, right? Hopefully you have MVM installed on your system by now. Now, in order for me to use the latest Node, I can't do it here. Remember, I need to use an administrative command prompt for me. For you, you may not have to, but I'm going to just close this down and I'm going to launch an administrative command prompt, right? And in the administrative command prompt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say NVM list. You can see now I have two versions. I have a 18.9.0, that's the current version, and I also have 19.0.0. I'm just going to use the latest version. So I'm going to say NVM use 19.0.0, and then it's going to switch. And if I do a node -- version, then you're going to see it switched, right? That's the latest version. Yay, awesome. Right now I'm using the latest version. And if you look at MVM for a second, it also has a way of removing stuff. So if I want to install, I can install a version, but I can also uninstall the old version. Let's do that. So clear, so MVM uninstall, right? And the version is 18.9.0, right? And it's going to go through and uninstall 18.9.0. And if I do an MVM list again, you're going to see that the only one I have in there is 19.0.0, latest version, and it's really that simple. And by the way, you don't understand when I say what simple is, because when I do this, back in the day, if I had to replace my NPM in Node, oh man, it's another like couple hours of work to do it properly. Here, there's no work. Zero. We're ready to go. Yeah. You're what? Were you able to run it before? Okay. We may have to do it. For now, you can ignore it. I'm just showing you what to do because you have Node on your system, right? If you go node -- version. So let's just move on, and then later on, maybe before we leave, we have time, I'll go through. 16. Wow. Okay. Did you ever install MVM? I'm not. I'm just asking, because if you did, if you installed MVM with me, then you would have been able to. Yeah, you may have to do reinstall of MVM, right? But that means you have to uninstall your node. Yeah, so you have to uninstall node first and then reinstall MVM. Please don't do it now. It's going to take too long. Yeah, I would recommend doing it at home. Yeah. I'm sorry?
You're already
I am taking it fast already? Okay, I'm hoping not. I'm not taking it the wrong way. I'm trying to go as slow as I can. Okay, so now that we've reinstalled Node to version 19.0, let's go back and launch this thing again. And I'm just going to go back into the proper folder that I want to do my installation again. So I want to go back into this folder here. This is the COMP2112 folder. And what I want to do is issue that same command that I had before, right? Which is, npx create React app. And I want to use a lowercase name, not an uppercase name, because React doesn't support uppercase names. So I can use something like week 8. And then -- template, and then TypeScript is what I want to use. Notice that all I'm doing is doing exactly this, the same thing that I did before. Okay. So that's what this big line is going to be. And if I press enter now, if we did everything properly, it should install everything we need. Let's try and see what happens. I can drag and drop it, yeah. If you drag and drop the folder, I did a CD command, right? And CD is change directory or change folder. That's what that does. We drag and drop it in, then we can change directory to whatever folder we want. Okay. And you can see that it's taking its nice sweet time to do its work. And by the way, here's something I also want you to think about. If this doesn't finish, which it may not, okay, it may not finish in your regular command prompt like this, you may have to do it in your administrative command prompt. Again, don't be upset about it. I'm not. And it's going to do what it's going to do. You're running create react app 5, which is behind the current release. We no longer support global installation in create react app. Please remove any global installs. Yeah, I didn't do an npm install. So if you did an npm install already, I would uninstall react app. That's what you would do. You want to uninstall this one. You ran the uninstaller. Okay. Did you have react app installed before? Huh? Is that what you had? So you see how this is, yeah, so that's what you have to do. You have to uninstall it. Yeah, you have to uninstall it. And you can do that through your administrative command prompts. Yeah, you may have to close down your windows and have one command prompt. Notice how mine is hanging. This is not uncommon, guys, right? So again, if you see here, I've got week 8 and it's hanging. So I can just Control C and get rid of it, stop the batch job. And then let's just get rid of week 8 one more time, right? Because it's hanging. Hanging means it didn't finish, right? A lot of times what I find is for you to make it work, you should do it with administrative command prompt. Let's try that again with admin command prompt. I think it's just easier for me to do it that way. So again, CD space, and again, here it is, Elena. I'm just dragging and dropping your week, COMP2112 in there, right? And if it doesn't work like that, by the way, and sometimes it's really weird because it should totally work, but it's okay because we can always swim to where it's supposed to be. We know that it's this. If I look at the address, here's the address that it's going to go to. I can always look at the address here that I want to go to. So, yeah. No, I'm saying this is the place I want to go to, right? So, I mean, worst case scenario, if I do CD space and I normally can drag and drop this entire thing in here, but if it's not working, like it seems like mine suddenly stopped working, remember, you can do it this way. We can also use PowerShell, right? So if I go to PowerShell, right? Windows PowerShell, I can use PowerShell as well, right? And PowerShell is another way of doing it. PowerShell is like Blue Window, right? The Blue Window gives us advanced commands like ls and clear. And I should be able to just do a drag and drop here, no problem, just like we've done before, right? So again, if I was going to issue the same command, which is again, npx create react app, right? And we do the name of the app, which is week 8, and then --task templates TypeScript, right? If it doesn't work here, we know it's an administrative issue, an administrative level issue, right? If it doesn't do it, right? Because it should totally work. It's not a big, thing that's happening, and it shouldn't take forever. It should be actually very, very fast. But sometimes it crashes on a regular command prompt or even regular, even our regular PowerShell. By the way, PowerShell exists with all Windows installations. If you're running on a Mac, you won't have this issue. You'll have another issue. And you can see it's almost done. Okay, when it finishes, this is the great thing. When this finishes, it's going to give you some commands. It's going to tell you what to do, right? Because you're scaffolding everything out inside week 8. There it is. It says, packages are looking for funding, run npm fund. No, I can't do that right now. What else we got here? Still can't get it to work. I ran a global uninstall and an administrative command. Huh, isn't that interesting? Okay, Kyle, we may have to do some, I may have to take control later on and try it if we have time today. If not, we'll do it offline. All right, so this is the thing done. And you can see that it gives me a few steering instructions. One of them is npm start. starts the development server. It does that. npm run build bundles everything into static files for production. So it tells you what it does here. npm run eject removes this tool and copies build dependencies and all that stuff, right? So it says we recommend start by doing cd week 8 and npm start. We're not going to do that, but what we're going to do instead is bring up our trusty tool, Visual Studio Code. So here's our Visual Studio Code tool, and I'm just going to drag and drop week 8 into there, right? I'm just going to drag and drop week 8 into there, I said. And then when I'm done, we should have everything that it looks like. Take a look. This is our new structure for React, okay? Now, if you're not with me, it's okay, because remember, we're recording this whole thing, and you have until Sunday to do your in-class exercise, okay? Okay. The other thing is that inside, let's take a look at some of these, the structure of what we have. We have node modules, right? Which has everything has been installed here. We have our public folder, and we have our src folder, which is our source folder. And we also have a bunch of other things here. So this is our new structure, okay? And we're going to customize this structure to make it our own. But like I said before, what we've done here with MPX and Create React App is we did something called scaffolding, okay? And scaffolding, what that is it means that we've created or constructed our application with one command, okay? Now I have some updates, it looks like. Let's take a look. Yes, reload required. Let's do that, reload. Okay, it's a bunch of deprecated stuff that we have to remove later on, and that's okay. And what I want to do now is I want to put this up on GitHub first before we move on. And let me just restart my Visual Studio Code. So to prepare for this, I'm going to go up online, right? And I'm going to make a brand new application folder right here in our GitHub repository. So new, I make a brand new repository here called COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester, and it's week 8. Okay, that's going to be our application for today. I'm going to go public so you guys can see it and press enter. How about 2112? That'd be okay. And I'm going to get the same steering direction that I had in the past, all of this stuff, right? And notice that if I go back to Visual Studio Code, it has a git ignore file built into it. It has a git ignore file that's going to ignore a bunch of stuff in my code, so I don't have to make one myself, okay? I want to connect my new week 8 folder to my new repository. And the way to do this, of course, is to use some commands. So control backtick to bring up my terminal window, just like we've done in the past. And I'm going to do something that we've done before. I'm going to do a git init, git add dot, git commit -m, and I'm going to say created new React app. Okay. And I want to connect it. I want to connect this thing to my repository online. So I'm just going to switch to this window, copy the last 3 lines of code here, because I did all this already just now. So copy this, go back to my Visual Studio Code and right click, and then press enter. And it's going to connect my app, my new app that I made, to my week 8 repository. If I go back to GitHub and if I refresh, you're going to see now that is the link that I'm using today. Okay, so you can always follow me here. Here's something you can do if you're having trouble with your Create React app, like Kyle. Download this. Download this thing right here. Download my project and start from there. Okay, so you don't have to wait for your tool to be fixed. Okay, you can just download this and you're ready to go. And here's the link. I'll put it up on the chat for you. So here it is. You can always download that from me and move from there. Okay, that's why we do this thing together. And by the way, this is a good start for your in-class exercise 5. Okay. All right, we're going to take a short break in 5 minutes. I'm just going to, because I know I need one. I'm sure you guys need one too. what I want to do here now is I just want to show you how it works. So now that I've downloaded and installed the React app and it's scaffolded everything out, let's just launch it and see what happens. And the way to launch it is we're going to use a new command called yarn start. Yarn start. What it's going to do, it's going to download everything we have. And if, by the way, if you have this, yarn is not recognized. That's why yarn is not recognized.
You don't have yarn.
Because you don't have yarn installed. Why don't we have yarn installed?
Because it's in the project.
Because I I switched npm and node versions. I got to do all that installation again. Like I killed my last version. So let's go through that very quickly. I'm just going to close this window off 1 second to make it easier. I'm just going to go through a command prompt. And a lot of times when I do installations, I want to do it for an admin command prompt. So I'm going to go up again back to here, go to command prompt, go to run as administrator. Ooh, that's loud. And then just type in the commands. I'm going to say npm install yarn -g. That'll do the yarn command, right? npm install TypeScript -g. That'll put TypeScript back in, right? We need those two things for sure. Okay. Yarn and TypeScript. We had other stuff like light server. We had light server. Remember light server last time? No more need for light server, guys. Light server, unnecessary, right? And for now, this is all we need, those two things. So yarn and TypeScript. Let's try this again. Woohoo! I love little hiccups like this. It's awesome. All right, back to this. Let's try it out again. I said, let's try it again. See, I'm declaring what I want to do. I'm using declarative talking to my computer, but it's not understanding me yet. Okay, a yarn start. I said, let's do that. All right, so what it's going to do is it's going to say, it's like saying React script start. And what it's going to do is it's going to start doing things like bundling my application, right? That's what it should be doing. And as soon as it finishes bundling my application, it should work just fantastic. Let's see if it actually works or if it's going to hang like it's been doing today. Oh yeah, here we go. It says, do you want this to work? And I'm going to allow access to my Windows Defender firewall so it can work properly. I don't care because I'm just working locally. And awesome, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. It's starting the development server. It's going to take its sweet time to start the development server. For me, it should have started already, but it's only because I'm running a lot of stuff here together. And what you're going to see is, take a look at this. It's launched this Chrome window, and there we go. There's React. Now this happens, listen, one thing is there's a first-time cost for everything. And you're paying up front for this, what I've just done, right? Once we've got this the first time, we're up and running, and this is React. So now you're going to look at this and go, woo, I'm so impressed, Tom. React. Fancy, exactly. Who cares? And I agree with you. I don't care either, right? But we're going to, after the break, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And after the break, we're going to rip this app apart and make it so that we're going to start building our 5-page site from scratch, okay? And I'll talk about how to do that. So let's take a short break. I'm going to stop recording this now, and we should get something that looks like this. Jobs care. I know. I hear you. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it, Kyle, after this. So stop recording this. We'll take a short break. It's 9:34. We'll come back in about 5 minutes. We'll do a washroom and water break. So about 9:40, we'll come back and we'll continue.